Hi, I'm Delane, and better known as 6GrimX on TikTok.
I'm Adam Rossmiller. I have a Dusty Pumpkin on Instagram, not much more social media than that.
This is our first episode of Esoterror.
And esoterror is the combination between the concept of esoterrorism and the esoteric in terms of hard found information that is often sought for by few, and the combination of using that information to undo the concepts of anything that you might be afraid of in the day-to-day, given our current climates. And I try to just have a podcast with them like a natural, organic podcast, and I just got inside my own head like, oh, let's talk about interesting topics, and it just made everything super fucking awkward. Like, for one of the guys, he was working on the road a lot, traveling around the country, working as an engineer. And so he'd survey land, know how to measure it by eyesight, and then get paid, like super decently, almost 6 figures a year to do so. And just trying to have a natural conversation with him while I'm so in my head about how it's going to sound just fucked the whole thing up. So at this point, I'm just definitely more about having that kind of organic camaraderie, which is obviously never going to be a problem for you and me.
So I guess where we could start is Adam and I met about 20 years ago at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design.
I mean, over 20 years ago at this point, right? It was fucking 2003. So what, August 2003?
Yeah.
First thing I seen, so we had the very first unit in the Bauhaus. The dorms were called the Bauhaus for Art College, Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design.
But it was the luck of the draw because remember, both of us signed up for single bedrooms, and the college ended up having not enough bedrooms, so they stuck us together.
In bunk
and
beds.
Good thing that we were able to click so well, otherwise it probably would have been a problem.
Yeah. Those bunk beds were so tiny anyways. Like, what's smaller, a twin or a full? It was the smallest bed you could imagine, and these things were only like 5 feet long. So both of our feet are hanging off the end of the thing. I remember the first day you go down into the basement unit, and they had the names of your roommates on the door, and my ignorant ass, I see Delane, and I'm thinking it's pronounced Delaney, and it's like, is this co-ed? And then I meet this guy, and it's about the manliest dude that you could ever possibly imagine. Like, oh, okay, so, one of the things that we all got along with was the fact that you and I were the Colorado natives. You know what? So you were born in Kansas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you're a Colorado native. If you live in Fort Morgan most of your life, you're more a native than most. And besides that, we were all so awkward because we were a bunch of the nerd kids from all of our backgrounds. And so when we got together, we realized that we didn't have to be the nerds anymore. Like, we all had our independent superpowers. But I remember that first night when everybody pulled out their magic cards. And we all got on from there. Like, our other 2 roommates were cool. But yeah, it was always just like you and me in it to win it.
Yep. So we definitely had our fair share of tripping as well, and trying to reach other realms or other higher consciousness, which has led us to this point now. Back then we didn't know what we were doing so much as we do now, but we've definitely had our fair share of experiences with that.
Oh, yeah.
And had our fear and loathing moments.
Oh yeah. I mean, that we just hit the ground running with all of that. It was like overwhelming in the best way, where our bodies could actually handle all of these new substances that we were doing and stuff, and all the new experiences combined with that. It was like the perfect culmination of fresh faces, a new environment in like a sleepy old town that wasn't even hardly a college town yet, and the whole place looked like something that Tim Burton threw up. Edgewater, Colorado, just absolutely gorgeous, not far from Sloan's Lake. Kind of walkable to the city. When we were high enough, we would just take that walk down to the city, and it was like, 1-2 hour long walk or whatever, but the things that we would see and experience on the way were just second to none. It's almost so hard to even recall any of that. Like, I kind of get the chills whenever I do, because it was just such a different modality,
It was definitely very spiritual. I mean, we had a lot of synchronicities happen. Like, we had an instance where we were tripping downtown, walking around, and we found this hat on that horse over by that tangerine shop.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I swear, Adam said something about having a dream about putting it there, and I remember seeing him put it there somehow
Yeah.
through like some kind of
That giant Pegasus. So
lucid
the
memory.
Pegasus is not easy to climb. It's next to impossible to climb. This giant bronze Pegasus, it's about 20 feet tall, and sitting atop its head is like a paper party hat. And I just got the ultimate sense of deja vu. Like, I know I put that there. I don't remember putting that thing there. Like, there are so many memories that I don't even recall a lot of them. I can't remember if you were tripping with us when Charlotte pointed the goose out of the sky at Sloan's Lake. It was like the first week, and she pointed it out of the sky and charted its flight pattern down into the water, and then almost like she had it lassoed with her pointing finger, drew it right up to the dock, patted the sucker on the head, and it just swam away and flew off. And like every one of our experiences was like that.
It was, and we had a few that we went to the mountains. We've had a lot of those instances.
Yeah.
We've encountered some things where it was also spiritual with spirits involved at one point.
Yeah.
We've had visuals of esoteric symbolism, which is what brings us here. I mean, to be real, this guy is the guy that got me started in esoteric symbolism. And we were just talking about this the other day, how when he first introduced me to it, and what was it called again? Esoteric Archives. Yeah.
It's like
It
the
was-
ultimate resource for any knowledge that you would ever want with any of that. It's overwhelming.
And at the point, yes, it was overwhelming. So I took a different path, and my path branched out more into the faith side of it, and I stepped away from this. And I guess if you want to call it fate, has led me back to esoteric symbolism, and us together to do this podcast to more or less explain how esoteric symbolism's been used as a form of terror to more or less scare people into submitting and being more docile to whatever they're subjugating us to, whatever agenda. And what we would like to do is try to take a step and show a different way, so that we're trying to be more positive here on this. Even though we want to talk about conspiracy theories and things on this podcast, we don't want to be super negative. We don't want to be involved in a lot of the negativity that I feel and he's feeling. It brings us down in the community.
The cancer bringers. Yeah, I think that what Esoterror means is that there are levels of symbolic encryption and such. It's the way that people's lizard brain responds when they see the golden arches or they see the face of Colonel Sanders or whatever. It just becomes this kind of an id response that you're being force-fed, where they don't even have to have the name of the company on the sign anymore. It's ubiquitous to the symbolism itself. And that's true of a lot of like esoteric sigils and whatnot. And also practices, is that whether or not we practice them, then a lot of the people that are on a completely separate life path of our own, like call it the Illuminati, call it the royal family, call it whoever, like the people that turn the neck on the head of human civilization and the people that are forcibly charting the change for those things, they're doing so in a way that not a lot of people realize, is that a particular event happens in the corridor of Taurus within the zodiac, like the time of the year that the Taurus is very prevalent. Then you have the shaman at January 6th who's wearing a bull head. And it's always these sort of staged events that they are orchestrating in a way that coincides with the way that they interpret these concepts. And being able to recognize these concepts is hopeful, because really all they're doing is some method of like LARPing, or it's like D&D for billionaires, which has like real freaky outcomes, to be sure, like what we're seeing today in the world. Name any billionaire: Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Bezos, old Tesla boy. But on the other flip side of it is that there's also so much knowledge that teaches you what to do with this particular time of the growth cycle, what to do with this particular time of the harvest cycle. When are those times? When are the peak times? Like, there's a reason that culturally we always poo-poo the idea of horoscopes and the zodiac. And yeah, the newspapers' horoscopes are like, today you will see a stop sign, like, holy God, I've seen it. Like, this is crazy. It's so fortuitous. But
for anybody that would shit on the concept of the horoscope or the zodiac or any level of esotericism, nobody can dispute how prominent the Farmer's Almanac is. And the Farmer's Almanac is one of the best executions of understanding esoteric knowledge.
So I'd like to take this moment to step back for a minute and get to where esotericism really started from. According to many of the mythologies, is the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
So in that storyline in the scriptures, we were here on Earth and we decided we were going to build with masonry, and they used a lot of masonry that's proved to this day to be way beyond its time. For them to build the way they did, using the angles that they did, and the architecture, they were able to build miles high. In the story, we were trying to build our way back up to the third heaven to reach our way back home. And God, or the divine being, as we would like to call him on this podcast, I mean...
Yeah, the all, the one, the entirety, everybody has a different definition, and it doesn't really matter to either one of us. Like, you're more devoutly religious, and you are on the devout, righteous path, whereas me, I'm just more of like a verb towards understanding that there is a culmination of energies and ideas, and that's my concept of God, so...
I just feel that God is more a title, and it's not properly used as the title that it is, so I'd rather just refer to it as the divine being. But he came down, saw what we were doing, and destroyed our temple, cast us across the lands, changed our language, and from this moment on, esoteric symbols were born, because this was the only way that we could communicate to each other on a world scale. And so a lot of this esoteric symbols that have been manipulated since this time. I mean, you got to consider that if we were separated, and there are people that are communicating this way, but there's people also on the good side of that as well. And I mean, Adam and I were talking about this the other day. If you think about the Jedi in Star Wars and the Sith, you're going to have the dark side and the light side. And of course, these beings would have a weapon of light to fight with, to defend these beliefs, and that you were going to have this occult sacred knowledge, which George Lucas definitely put into the Star Wars franchise. And I mean, all of this is hidden in plain sight to more or less, what's the word I'm looking for?
Indoctrinate.
Pre-program us.
Yeah, and indoctrinate for sure. And so the exciting thing about the concept of this podcast is how much of our information is actually shared via light now. I mean, not everybody has fiber internet, which is communication via light and such, but as we're just using cell phones right now, that stuff is in the ether. And so whereas it's an interesting and fun metaphor with the Sith and the Jedi of using weapons of light, is that communication is almost it is very much light, or it is an aspect of ether through which we're able to reach whoever wants to listen to us.
So, since you're talking about the ether, Adam, why don't you take a second to explain that for the listener who might not know what the ether is?
Well, I mean, I certainly would butcher it, I think, because I have more of a layman's interpretation of what the ether is. But the ether for me is the void of creation. I always think as a sculptor when, and I can't remember who initially said it, but a lot of sculptors say that the work of art is already in there. I just had to dig it out. And
Bernini.
I really feel like Bernini had one of the best connotations of that, but it goes back like almost to the earliest records that we have recorded of sculpting, is that is always unique to the process of sculpting as subtractive. If you compliment them on the works that they had achieved, then they are the first ones to say, like, I didn't do anything, like it was already in there, I just found it. And to me, that's like the ether of that everybody has an access to. Like it kind of incorporates with the conscious and the subconscious. It incorporates with the born and the unborn. It incorporates with the executed and not executed concepts. So for those that are maybe having a difficult time here and there, as you access the ether, if you're not doing what you feel is living up to your full potential, in some ways you have to understand, as like Neil and Train put it, the joy of waiting, is that it's there, and when it is found is to when it's to be found. Like the ether is, if not the birthplace of all vibration and verb, then I would think that the ether has, if not a shadow cast by those things, then it does factor into it somehow.
So would you say that the ether to you is more like a consciousness download that others like Nikola Tesla or Leonardo da Vinci may have accessed at some point?
I think, yeah, and I think that not to say that necessarily somebody becomes an avatar to it, they become water diviners to be able to access it. And it's free to anybody, but you do have to calibrate yourself to a particular degree to really delve into it enough, which in the case of a lot of people that do so well, Nikola Tesla, probably the best of them, like you can go so deep that you might not be able to find your way back. Who was it you were talking about the other day saying that they had maybe gone too far into the reeds and couldn't find themselves again? I feel like that was something you brought up just the other day and it really resonated with me.
I'm trying to think, but I don't remember.
One of those Bledsoe podcasts, I think it had something to do with that maybe, but yeah, we've been on the raggedy edge of the ether many a time, I think. It's certainly that time that you, me, Anton, and your brother Brandon went up to Lookout Mountain, and there wasn't anything there. There was nothing that any of us could see, and we were trying to climb up the trail, and each and every one of us came to the exact same unmarked spot, and we're just convinced like we couldn't go any further. There was a phenomena there or some kind of a rift. And whatever it was that we couldn't see whatsoever, we just had that animal instinct telling us like, I'm going no further. Like, I feel like the ether can physically pierce into the material realm in some regards, but that was the best example that I've had of it.
So staying on the subject of the ether, and Marvel touched on it too as one of the Infinity Gems, but in Gnosticism, the ether is basically like, if you believe in flat earth theory, the waters above, it was like a black murky waters that exist that everything hangs in. So everything is suspended within this ether in this realm, and that's the way we exist, which is basically the same explanation Adam just gave. So with that, I do believe that we could reach that. We have the abilities to do this, and there's meditation out there, there's teachings out there to help us get to this point. But exoteric religions or faiths,
You say exo or eso?
Exo. So
Exo.
by that, I'm meaning that the Western religions, when the faith first was divided, there is a belief that the Messiah himself taught a different way. In Luke chapter 8, verse 10, he says that he will give us, or it's Mark, my apologies, Mark chapter 8, verse 10, he will give us the secrets and parables, and to his disciples he will give the true secrets. And if you look at the scripture, it is written in parables. And the scripture's been so bastardized throughout time that it's hard to believe what institutions are telling us what the scripture is really about. But one thing is that when the church first became divided, and this was after the time that the Messiah had existed, and there was a people called the Chalors. And during the 12th century, the Vatican led a campaign to execute all of these people and destroy all of their teachings. They murdered the men, women, children, and the elderly and burned all of their teachings. It was said that nothing had ever been done to a people like this before. And these people were considered the direct descendants of the disciples themselves. What they were teaching were things like meditation, karma, reaching a higher vibration, things that the Vatican didn't think fit their narrative. So by the 12th century, they exterminated these people, later followed by exterminating the Knights of the Templar, because they were afraid, well, more or less, the king of France told them they were fighting a war in blasphemy because they were afraid of how much power they had accumulated. So in 1307, on October 13th, they murdered the Knights of the Templar, who became 3 different groups that we know today: the Freemasons, the Illuminati, and the Rosicrucians.
Yeah, once you really get into the history, it always kind of, for me, dials back to the concept of Babel and the people, all of the tribes being scattered and us losing the shared language. But it's also important to understand when you discover these hidden histories, it's always just a tale of power undoing a competing power. And one always emerges from the next, to the point that I think that we might be in one of the longest eras of the same consolidated power. Like the arguments that, and just so many different politicians actually have caches of Persian gold from untold millennia ago and such as that. It certainly in a lot of ways feels like we're living under the same influence and id and concept of power, especially when getting back into the foundationals, say the zodiac itself. Nobody has any concept as to who invented the zodiac. We have just, you could look up at the stars and connect the dots to create any given shape. But if you look at Taurus and instead see, whatever baseball star, that's not what that is. The constellation Taurus is accredited the way that we interpret the energy of a bull in the season that we would view and observe the energies of a bull. Same with any of the other items that you find on the wheel. And so, the chart of Babel and the differing of language and everything, it's important to have a better concept of the use of language, whereas if you can deconstruct what it is that your brain is doing when I say a word and you're able to interpret what it is, then our language has evolved in a way that two of the foremost concepts that are valid to the Western, certainly American mind, I would think is, for example, the cell. Cellular biology, the building blocks of all carbon, biomatter whatsoever. But when saying cell, the cell of your body, I'm not going to name the parts because I can't exactly do it right now, but there's also the connotation of a prison cell. You had given another really good example of that in terms of the duality of words.
And the rib cage. So your soul is contained by your rib cage, which is housing your spirit. So we're trapped here in this physical body. And so for what we're talking about with linguistics and them actually holding a magical undertone, and they are magic. And this is why you have to be careful of what you speak into reality. There's a test done, and it was Dr. I can't think of his name right now. But he did the water test where he spoke positive to the water for a month. He ignored one glass of water for a month, and then he spoke negatively to a glass of water, and it affected it greatly. But on this wordplay, like parents, the reason why you're called parents is because you're a pair that pays rent. You go to a job that's your occupation, and occupy is a word that we use in war. So you go to your war zone, your workplace, and you occupy your position where you're constantly in an aggressive state of mind because now you're warring with everyone around you to occupy that space. Mm-hmm. And that's just little things of the wordplay. So
the parent one is real interesting to me because you can't really think of a synonym. Like, okay, so you have mother and father, or mother and mother and father, whatever. But I can't really think of a strong synonym for parents. What would the equivalent be? Your progenitors, so that's exactly it, is that we have this one word, and the way that you break it down is very interesting because I think that it does actually embodify a lot of the concepts that we don't necessarily acknowledge or that we're not necessarily aware of, but that it does define it in a way that it is synonymous with the concept of it, is that when you were a parent, you are a peon that pays rent? It seems like a pair that pays rent. Okay, yeah. And it's completely ingrained in our concept of the word as to what parents are, which is why it could be one of the explanations as to why divorce has become so rife in Western civilization, is that there's not a lot else riding on it because we don't have generational wealth of wisdom and knowledge to pass on any longer. Everybody is just getting by to raise the children and then send them on their merry until they create the cycle all over again. There's no other means of investing into this bond and relationship than it is just to pass on the genetic seed and then let it do its own thing in the biological universe as we understand it.
But that's the purpose we're here, is to try to help everyone understand esoteric symbolism and how it's being used against us, how you can use it to help you elevate yourself to a higher vibration or frequency, or help you adjust your consciousness. Because here, we do believe in the idea of reincarnation. We're open to the idea. I mean, that's part of the Gnostic teachings, Hermeticism. Many ancient cultures, Egypt, Hinduism, Buddhism, all taught about reincarnation. And even the Messiah himself taught about reincarnation, which is why it was wiped from the scriptures. But with that being said, your spirit chose this life. As crazy as that sounds, we chose this path because it was something that was going to get us to a better, higher consciousness, no matter what we went through. And spirit, just like us, isn't exactly perfect. Things can get out of hand. But whatever path we chose, whatever life we chose to be in at this moment, we chose that before coming here. That way that we knew we would start elevating ourselves better than we did the life prior.
I don't know why that resonates with me so much. Every time you say it, I think and I could almost remember like Edward Elric at the Gates of Truth. And man, since I was, maybe I'm just misremembering a memory I had when I was younger. But I feel like even when I was young, I had this concept that I was standing before somebody and I just said, fuck it, we're playing it on extreme mode. Like, throw me in there, throw me into one of the most vibrant, violent, confusing, disconnected, yet interesting, beautiful times in human history where there's just facets of technology that are completely incomprehensible. Like, there's more people than there have ever been in recorded history to interact with and everything. And I said, that one right there, put me down there. And I really got to remember that every time I get down on myself or I'm having a hard time. And it's like, well, hey, I'm the one that bought the ticket.
And for those of you that are listening, Edward Elric, the reference that he's making is from Full Metal Alchemist. And actually what he's saying, and it resonates with me too, because that's how I visualize it when we were at that spiritual path to choosing our destiny, is that in the show Brotherhood, when they transmute and they see truth on the other side, that's what this being is called. And this is spoiler alert. This being then allows you to see a piece of truth, whether within yourself or in the world, but it comes at a great cost.
It's interesting in the story, and the story is probably the best unpacking. It's almost like a mirror of the root dialect of our own reality. And it's anime, to be sure, but I mean, what anime doesn't do a good job of that? Neon Genesis Evangelion. But it's an interesting parallel or parable because they give up a physical cost. And I don't want to give too many spoilers, but the brothers, one of them sees the truth that he seeks and he loses an arm. And there's the metaphor of saying that, well, you will only go in life half as much a man of being able to produce or retain or care with the lack of that one arm. That is the cost of the truth.
And his leg.
Well, he gives that one up to bring Al back.
Oh, yeah.
Remember. Yeah, he pays the cost to bring his brother's soul back to bond into an inanimate object. And so his brother saw even more truth.
Or I thought he gave his arm up to bring his brother's soul back, and his leg was lost when they did the taboo.
Yeah, that's right.
So they did the taboo, and one brother loses a leg, the other brother loses his body.
Yeah.
And to not lose him forever in the ether, I guess.
Right.
The brother sacrifices his arm to transmute his brother's soul to a suit of armor.
Bring him back as much as he could. And so it's an interesting concept when you're talking about that we're the ones that bought the ticket, is that everybody has a certain flaw. And it might not be a physical quality. It could be, somebody was like, I want to live this life, when they chose the life they wanted to live in from the ether. And they were like, okay, what do you give up? And somebody gives up self-confidence. Another person gives up self-awareness. Another person gives up self-control. Another person gives up, you name it. Like there are just so many different aspects that a person would be willing to pay to see, like, okay, like you could, I hate to use the metaphor of playing a game or whatever, but to do so, you're going to be playing it in certain circumstances that are also true of you. And so there is always going to be something that is somebody's karma to develop within their life, this life that we are if not reincarnated to a purpose of us learning, that we choose to be reincarnated into because we are excited to learn. And we do it under particular parameters, like somebody has alopecia, somebody has, I don't know, like bad toenails or foot funk or something like that. That's just how they have to live under the guidelines of what they chose.
Yeah, and I don't believe here that we were meant here just to suffer. I mean, suffering is a part of life. That is part of what we're going to experience. And I believe that when Soul brought us back, it wasn't to suffer to find out our true path. Suffering is going to bring out the divine in you because you are a divine being. But we're not here just to do that. We're here to experience so that we can show ourselves what we already know. Spirit already knows everything we're going to encounter, and we have to have faith that whatever path Spirit chose for us, then we're strong enough and capable enough to handle it. And rather than give up or let the world beat us down, we can get through this. And I mean, there's a lot of ways through meditation and through using crystals or prayer or, I mean, even magic, which is more the left-handed path, which we're not here to try to talk about, more or less.
I don't know anything about it. I tried and not for me.
And just touching on it, because we were talking about Full Metal Alchemist, they're actually using real sigils. And these are sigils that John Dee used, the original 007, who was in Queen Elizabeth's court. And they
Original
use these
007 and original Doctor Strange.
Yeah, and they use these sigils also in the Doctor Strange movies. So they're using real magic in front of our eyes, and who knows what they're using to bind us with. But in Full Metal Alchemist, if I'd like to touch on that still, is that there's something they were doing in Brotherhood with the Philosopher's Stone, and spoiler alert, I guess. And what they were doing is they were using the town as a transmutation circle to transmute all the souls to make the Philosopher's Stone. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the ancient architecture here in America, even George Washington was a part of this, and the people that he had hired to be the masons of the towns, they built these in 5-pointed stars and other esoteric symbols, leading me to believe there's a reason for it, whether it's harnessing energy or whatever. I can't say that I know the exact reason that it is, but a lot of our older cities, our main cities, are built on these grids, the old roads that are sigils.
Well, okay, so it's not that alien a concept, because harvesting energy is what a bazaar or a marketplace does. It's almost like an artery thoroughfare, the connotation of like a marketplace of ideas and whatnot. It's just that what they were doing is that the energy is there in Wiccan observation of people dancing around in a circle and observing whatever. I'm not real familiar with a whole lot of it. And via that energy being committed, there is the execution of the concept in itself, and then the rest of the civilization is built around it. So it's a very real concept. It's just that the way that sigils are utilized today, it is very much more something is happening there. There's some other kind of a vibrational thing that's happening with what it is that's being impressed upon us.
There is, and our energy is being fed on. And here at this podcast, what you're going to hear a lot about is the consciousness matrix. And when we're talking about that, what we're referring to is basically this matrix our souls are captured in. So when we're being reincarnated, I mean, in my belief system anyways, I believe we're already in a type of purgatory. Our souls have already passed that end point, and to escape here, this is a realm that we're trapped in. And whatever beings that are controlling this world at the moment, they're feeding off our energy, just like in the Matrix. And I mean, I say that loosely because that's the only way that pop culture has made it that people can understand what we're trying to relay here. But with the consciousness, okay, you are a divine being. When you're thinking of self, you are not this thing right here. We are beyond this. We are a spiritual being that lives beyond this lifetime. And when you reincarnate, you're coming back here and your energy is being used. So when you're able to wake up and reach a higher vibration, you can escape this reality. You can move on to the next part of the spiritual world. But as long as we stay pretty much NPCs, you know, non-playable characters in this reality, and we go on with our mundane lives, then we'll be doomed and trapped to be stuck here to be fed on by whatever entities are making our deaths useful.
Yeah. Yeah, very much a kind of parasitism. And obviously that sounds pretty woo-woo, psychedelic or whatever, but if you consider that the very creation of what we know to be biological parasitism was the realization of this force from the ether in the very first place, like, if you could just consider a reality where parasitism is just a completely alien concept, everything makes and does what it does. You could talk about that everything that needs to live needs to kill, but that's a pact. That isn't parasitism. Parasitism often benefits the host enough that it can take away from the host like something also fundamental at the same time. And I agree with the Matrix analogy and everything, and I am all about the achieving higher realms and better vibrations and just personal betterment and whatnot. But on the same note, one of the points that I'm really trying to explore myself is that even within the Matrix, beauty exists there. And it isn't a thing to become complacent about, to just say, like, I don't need to worry about what's on the other end of this pod that I'm just sitting in like pink goop in. It's to say that if it is some grand design to entrap us, then they had to create a well enough trap that there are items of benefit for us here as well. And so many of these aspects within the very concept of the Mr. Smiths holding us down with their boot on our necks is that they don't realize that they probably gave us all of the tools to not only escape the menagerie that they have us in or on, but they also gave us the ability to not just ascend beyond it, give it death, natural causes, violent causes, whatever, like into whatever other realms that we're traversing the universe and existence and energy, but also to bring something back. You know, maybe in the next realm we don't remember anything about this, but I think that important and beautiful enough things will happen to us that it really colors what we are at our root dialect.
And so I think, you know, what we're trying to accomplish here is trying to help people reach this point. I mean, obviously, we can't help people that are not ready to receive the information. All we can do is point in the right direction or help you understand what is being used in front of you. And what Adam's kind of talking about, what's being used at our disposal, where we can have power, is we have the power of manifestation. And the more that we realize our own consciousness, the more that consciousness begins to observe consciousness thinking and acting and feeling, that is when you start to reach a higher state of consciousness. And at that point, you can manifest your reality. I mean, day to day, we're transitioning into realities that are like our own, but just minuscule differences in it. And we don't even realize it. And this is, if string theory is 100% proven, then we're creating a reality with every decision that we make. And when we realize when we're phasing in and out of realities, that's when they say you can control doing that. But you're doing it naturally all the time, even in your sleep state. So it's not that you have to learn how to do it. It's refocusing on doing it and realizing when you're doing it.
You know, that shit resonates with me so much, talking about manifesting something into a slightly different reality. It resonated with me as to why I think I love fall so much in the changing of the leaves, is that every minuscule fractional universe of change is that it becomes a harmony in autumn, and then one leaf is a different universe and another leaf is a different universe, and then it's just this orchestra of everything lighting up and on fire. And that's why I think it is that autumn is so associated with mystical and esoteric and magical, and death in a lot of ways. Like it is very much this realm between two or more concepts. Yeah, I don't know. And granted, I'm also looking out the window and looking at the beautiful fall colors that we're starting to get, so that's nice.
I love the analogy you used about the tree. I was talking to you about that the other day with the tree of life, and why we're never told why what's growing on the branches, because the roots and the tree with the branches represents what the divine God gave us, the tools, and that's our foundation. But what the leaves are, and when the tree's growing, that is what we give back to our life, to spirit, to this reality. That is where we're growing. This is what fruits we're bearing in this world, is what growth comes on that tree.
Yeah, that's pure chill. So I just finished Black Science, Rick Remender, can't remember any of the other artists. It's one of the most amazing graphic novels ever. I sent you a couple of images. I got to find you a copy of that thing, man. I'll buy it wholesale for you to read it, because they talk exactly about that. They're traversing through different realities. And then every now and again, you keep getting these references to the eucalyptus. And I'm like, is this a mispronunciation of the Eucharist? Is that where they're going with it? But no, at the very end of it, spoiler alert, you finally figure out what the eucalyptus is, and it's apparently the way that a eucalyptus tree grows is that it has one of the most complex and unique root systems. I just got to look that up real quick.
And it's funny that he's saying this, because the other day we were talking about this thing with the tree of life, and to get off on a side tangent, I guess it's more or less related, but I don't believe that we're here to try to reach that spiritual side right now in our physical. We came here to learn things, and not learn, but experience. And when you're no longer here in this physical realm, you can go further in your spiritual realm. So right now, when we're trying to see spiritual and your vibrations going that way, or you're meditating and you feel like you're ascending to other spiritual realms, all of this is just spirit connecting with the physical and trying to have the understanding of what you already know.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the joy, well, I mean, that's a contradiction, the joy of failure, the grace of failure, and being able to still establish joy despite any number of failures. I mean, most of the worst failures that influence people, I think, are the external influences that nobody has any control over, say a car accident. Well, the only answer to just not getting bent up about a car accident was to not drive that day, and that's just not in the cards. Like,
oh, you don't want to show that to the audience who may be watching.
Yeah, I mean, I could
when
turn
we get
it
this
right
video
around.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're just starting, guys, and eventually we're gonna get better
It's
here.
going to be
at this podcast.
less manual and DIY and such, but just the root structure of a eucalyptus is it's pretty wild. And anyways, they make the metaphor. They start off talking about the onion, and they develop a device to go between the layers of the universal onion. And so every decision doesn't scatter out, really, it pierces the onion. And every layer is like vastly different. There's one universe, the first universe they wind up in, you love it so much. The Native Americans discover high technology and they take the rest of the world over. So they have like holographic laser hawks and shit. They've got like shamanic healing power gauntlets. It's the most badass thing I've ever seen in my life. Like the whole time I'm reading it, I'm just like chills, pure chills. And so that's like the first layer of the onion. It's World War I, but it's the world versus the Apache. But they have like giant fighting robots and shit. It's so good. Laser tomahawks. As they pierce the onion more and more, there's this echo between their doppelgangers that keeps referring to the eucalyptus. And it isn't until much, much later in the story that they explain that the eucalyptus root has this fractal way of growing out, because the Australian soil is so harsh, it has to propagate itself in this way that almost like the opposite of an aspen forest. You know how aspen forests are all related and they all share the same core? It's all the same animal. Like a single aspen shelf is one organism. It's because they're all interconnected. A eucalyptus is like the opposite of that. And the way that each tree sends its tendrils out is a culmination of each is so associated with the stem that it came off of that they're indiscernible from each other. And it comes out almost in a perfect fractal, which is the way that a lot of people understand string theory.
And sacred geometry. So if you're new to our show or any esoteric symbols or any of this speak, sacred geometry is the knowledge that was supposedly given to us by the supposed gods that taught us math and sciences. And you have the Genesis pattern, which forms in the seed of life. And it's called the Genesis pattern because it proves that creation happened in a period of 6 days from consciousness. And with that seed of life, that is repeated throughout all of life, whether flowers grow in that spiral, which is the Fibonacci sequence, pi, the golden ratio. But even the embryo inside of a woman forms with the same as a seed of life. Mm-hmm. Your cells form in the same as a seed of life. And again, this is the same 6-day pattern that consciousness created. And from that seed of life, you get the flower of life, the tree of life, and all these other symbols that go deeper into math. And eventually you get Metatron's cube, which gives us the Merkaba and the Platonic solids.
All factored into the Lesser Key of Solomon. There was something that I had seen just the other day about the root dialect of existence, and generally you could reduce it all down to 216, which is it's like the ultimate expression of prime numbers. And the interesting thing in the mathematical language is the concept of a prime number is that it's one of the ultimate makers, is that it always has something to give with anything you apply it to. There's always going to be some weird, often random seeming kind of result that you get when you extrapolate or apply any prime number to anything else. It doesn't even matter besides zero, but zero being almost purely, not a purely Roman concept. Actually, it's probably one of the concepts that allowed the Roman Empire to flourish as much, is that not a lot of civilizations had so much of a concept of zero. It was just a completely alien idea. Don't ever divide by zero, goof stuff up.
So talking about numbers, also on the show, we're going to talk a little bit about gematria.
Yeah.
And gematria is how numbers are basically a hidden language within our language that also unveils secret codes, I guess you would say. And for those of you that are all talking about the big subject of November 24th, 2022, a little gematria here for you. I mean, no one knows the day or the hour. Nobody's going to predict the end times. It's not going to be somebody predicts it and we're going to have time to prepare for something of that catastrophe.
Is November 24th, like this year, a fortuitous thing? I haven't heard.
Yeah, so there's a lot of rumors going on around with that, whether it's going to be Bitcoin switching over to the currency, what it's going to affect the world. A lot of people are talking about it. But some gematria for that date, I mean, it is going to be an important date as far as numbers go, because you have November, right? Or not November, September, I'm sorry. September 24th, 2022, which is tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Today's the 23rd, I thought.
We'll see now, I gotta check. Wake up. God damn it.
So September is the 7th month for us, but this is coming from a Gregorian calendar, which the months were changed in homage to other Greek deities. So the month system does not make sense to what the numbers actually are. So with it being 7, right, or with it being the 9th month, right, when it's actually Sept is 7, okay, but it's the 9th month. And in alchemy, as above, so below. So 9 is 6, and 6 is 9. So the September is representational of 6. 2 plus 4 on the day equals 6. And for 2022, you got 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 2 equals 6. So the date represents 666 in gematria.
It was yesterday.
Oh, okay. So
what happened? I missed it. I was working.
Either way, I've been hearing all kinds of rumors that it was going to have something to do with switching over to global currency and it affecting us in a big way. Now, not to say that I don't think that's going to happen.
They might have signed a bill about the Fed adopting a crypto standard, actually. I might have seen that article yesterday.
And that was a big rumor that everyone was talking about, maybe the thing happening. But I do think it's going to affect our economy. I don't want to concentrate on that because that's a negative thing, I think, in our world. And I believe that the more we give in to what's going on around us, the more we get trapped in this matrix around us, because we're starting to believe what we're seeing when reality is a deception of of what you see to see is to be manipulated. And we think that, the reality, they say, is 99.9% not real, right? Anything physical in the physical world. So
Shadow was something else.
we are all constructs of the consciousness, and I believe that, and I've believed this for a long time, that we all only exist because we wanted each other to exist. We're all here because we wanted each other to be here. And that's the consciousness we're all connected to. It's the deeper consciousness within us, the divine consciousness that created us. So in the Genesis pattern, and this is how it's explained in sacred geometry, is you have the first circle. Well, first, consciousness exists in nothingness. Consciousness can't move or has no point of reference in nothingness. So consciousness then creates an orb around itself. And in doing that, then it duplicates itself, which takes 6 days before it completes the full shape.
Yeah.
And in that time is creation.
That is a revolution, right? So revolution, axis.
Correct.
I'm forgetting the other one. I always get those goofed up. So it is a revolution. It's a revolutionary act. I'd never be one to tell somebody to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And I never really got along with the idea that if somebody's having a hard time, like, I'm not going to give an example of a hard time. I could think of a lot of people that have been through a lot of shit. When you tell them the concept that, the Lord gives his strongest warriors the heaviest burden, kind of an aspect. But recently, especially, I have started to feel some kind of guilt about me not presenting and manifesting well enough that there do seem to be some dark events on the horizon. And I don't focus on them as much as it's just something that I can't ignore. It's like the sensation of somebody looking at you. Everybody has scientifically proven that that's the thing. Or animals being able to respond to an earthquake hours before it even occurs. We also have that genetic material and that instinct to be able to respond to it. And I mean, for me, it's kind of like the hero's journey of a call to action of that. If I am getting these whispers in the woods, or this reading from my crystals or the goat entrails or whatever, then I have just recently started to feel responsible that it's on me to find a better course. And that if that is the case of outside influences that are creating these problems for me and everybody I love and the whole existence I love, then sometimes it isn't just a question of ignoring it, but it is being present to it, but also appreciating everything that you would ever fear being taken away. Like, for example, fall in Colorado is just one of the most gorgeous times ever. I can't take my eyes off looking out the window and just seeing the nature in my neighborhood. Just experiencing the sun in your skin and watching the flies buzz around and the kids play in front yards and riding a bicycle around for no reason and just shooting the shit.
So while you were talking, you gave me an epiphany of what life really is, our experience of our destruction, I guess, more or less, is think of it like Ghostbusters. So when, what's her name? It's not Zool, is it? Zool is the...
Zool was like the guardian, the gatekeeper, but then
so
the god
what
was the god's name?
It started with the Z too, but anyways, the god tells them that you will dream up your own destruction, basically. And they say, okay, everyone clear your minds. And what does Ray do? But he thinks about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And that is what comes to destroy New York, right? That is basically what we're doing here. When we look, like what Adam's saying, when we're looking at what they're telling us, you start to believe in that. And we're manifesting that just by believing in it. And this is why I say, it's not that I don't think these things are out there. I just don't want to concentrate on those negative types of conspiracies here. We'll acknowledge them and we'll probably discuss them here on this podcast. But we're both not in that mindset to want to dwell on those types of conspiracies, because I just feel that it's going to create more of a negative mindset, and we're going to push ourselves to that. Bill Maher once said, the thing I hate about a self-fulfilling prophecy is that it's self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
and that really is the case with us. I mean, we believe there's an end, so there's going to be an end. That's inevitable.
People are certainly manifesting that. I mean, of all of the beautiful aspects of any religious indoctrination, everybody has taken like the end story, because it's almost like culturally we've been tricked into thinking we're tired. And I don't think this place is suffering. Most everybody comes together in like the very high-minded civilizations, say like the Shaolin monks, and they're like, oh yeah, everything is suffering. It's like, we figured it out, we got the answer. And it's like, it ain't a question of an answer. You're just saying it's suffering, and you guys are the most physically adept and independent minds conceivable. Like, you are such at one with the universe. You're a tree, you're a ground squirrel, you're a Sasquatch. Like, the very concept that their end result is going to be to tell people like, oh yeah, it's all suffering. Like, my ignorant ass, that's not my experience. It's I'm not done with it. And I mean, the both of us, really all of us in the early 2000s maybe, and not just Rimcat, but I mean people in general, were very focused on like apocalyptic concepts. You, me and Maynard especially would get together, and Travis would even not gaslight us, but like, carry our water for us, talking about like, oh yeah, it's all crazy, like it's the end of days, blah, blah, blah. We're headed for a cataclysm that is hard to walk away from. But we didn't even realize when we were younger that what our souls were telling us is that even if that is the case, I'm still not done with it. Even if that is the case, like, we will persist beyond it and do everything we can to establish. And I'm not even saying that's the outcome. I'm saying that if come what may is nightmare fuel, then we will be the dreamers to be able to persist beyond it in a way that benefits others and hopefully benefits reality as a whole.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel that we're definitely the positive side of looking at things in a negative way, I guess, is that what it does is it brings us closer to the divine consciousness. It brings us closer to our spirituality. I know most people that go down this path or even go into the rabbit hole, right? Whether it's conspiracy theories or whatnot, and we see the darkness of what humanity is, it ends up leading us closer to our spirituality. It leads us to that divine being or God. And I mean, not everyone here believes in God. Not everyone in the world believes in God, but people believe there's some kind of divine presence out there, or some kind of energy or spirituality out there. And it seems to be in the conspiracy world, those of us that get so far deep in it, yes, we may reach a point of depression, may even want to end it. It's because we want to escape this reality. That's what your soul is telling you. But there's something here that we have to experience. That's why we came here. It's part of our growth.
I mean, I just always had that sensation of somebody stepping on my grave, is that what I'm here to experience is that quality of love that I always had ingrained within me, that seems to be cliche, cheesy, or just unattainable or whatever, but being able to establish that in any given thing that I do. It could be writing, it could be painting, producing, it could be understanding somebody, it could be anything. It could be any given fleeting moment, but just to be able to understand something in its pinnacle purity, or pinnacle purity isn't the way that I would put it. I mean, it's all about imperfections, really. It's about the incompletion. Maybe that's what the monks are saying when they say that it's all suffering, is that there is always going to be the bittersweet of incompletion, but it is incompletion that makes things so profound and attractive. It is those things that we seek, and there is never any answer to the seeking. The seeking is what it's all about. It is the verb.
Exactly, and we were talking about this the other day because there was a movie. Remember, we watched it a long time ago, and it was based on a true story about the Olympics. I'm trying to think of what it is right now, but the guy breaks his legs in a motorcycle accident, if you remember. And the way they show it is it's like cubes, breaking like ice cubes, if you remember. And they tell him he'll never walk again. And Nick Nolte's in the movie. And the guy calls him Socrates because he's like a philosopher telling him things. And they go on this journey. He keeps telling him, I got a place I'm taking you. So the guy gets all excited. because he's trying to heal and trying to compete back in the Olympics. And this guy basically helps get him back on his feet. It's a story about Dan something, not Brown. It's Dan something. He
Really
wrote an
rings a bell. You're
autobiography.
saying we watched this like back in the
Yeah,
day?
you, me, and my brother. So,
Man, I don't remember that. It sounded kind of like the Animatrix episode where the guy, the runner.
oh yeah.
Yeah, God.
So they get to the top of the mountain, and he's like, "Oh, great, we're here. What is it you wanted to show me?" And Nick Nolte's like, "Right there, it's a rock." And he's like, "Really? You brought me all this way to show me a rock?" And he tells him, "It's not the rock. See, you were happy a minute ago before you knew what you were coming up here to see." He said, "What I'm trying to show you is it's about the journey. It's about the path getting there. It's not about your destination." So you were excited and you wanted to come here. You were looking forward to this moment. And now that you see that it was a rock, you're disappointed. Think about the way you felt getting here.
That one of the best metaphors that I've heard recently. I listened to a lot of Dave Smith, Part of the Problem. The guy is amazing. He kind of headed the Mises Caucus for the Libertarian Party. And what I love about him is that as much as I focus on politics, I hate everything to do with politics, but that's one of the reasons that I familiarize myself with it as much as possible. If I had a garden, I'd familiarize myself with pests and predators and understand all of that. Is the way that I look at it. But what's refreshing about him is that he says that no matter what it is you see, it's just all about positivity. You know, like these politicians are going to do everything they can by design to get you down. And that's why we need like another group of people, be it a official political party or not, to bring positivity. Like, yeah, we need to write new policies and create better endeavors, but all that it really comes down to is being positive. And so anybody else that is trying to detract from his message, he's like, look, you guys are saying that you're dying of thirst. And he's like, I don't have the water, but I know where it is, and it's right up that hill. All you have to do is get up the hill to get it. Everybody's argument is to say like, oh, well, it's just so hard getting up that hill. And he's like, okay, that's not an argument. Like if you're dying of thirst, the solution is hydrate yourself with the water that I know where it is. And I can tell you how to get there, but you got to do it yourself kind of an approach. And the way that he sold it to me was like really resonating.
I think this is time. Glitch forward through the future, and now I got an empty bladder.
We had a couple of technical difficulties and a couple of biological difficulties, but we're back now with a simple outro to say, hi, everybody.
Do you feel more like you do now?
Than you did a little while ago.
Or less like you do now than you did in a little, or you will in a little bit?
I don't know if there's anything more to say. It's just a wonderful conundrum. Anyhow, yeah, that's episode 1. So super, just hitting the ground running, fucking around, fucking off, having a good time. Hopefully people enjoy it. If you find anything useful about it, feel free to drop us a line. You can hit me at rossmiller84@gmail.com.
Or delane.r.barham6@gmail.com.
And yeah, we'll take it from there. Hope to see y'all soon, and we'll be here in the ether.
All right, bye guys.
Adios.